I'm back with another video, and this video is going to be on positional play and breaking your team's offensive structure up into different spaces. So before we start, please like and subscribe to the video. That means an awful lot to me and helps keep the channel going, help me keep pumping out content. And if you want to see any other concepts featured, please let me know in the comment section below. But first, the first space we're going to highlight is the mutual help space. And this is primarily the first line passing options of the ball possessor, or the player in possession of the ball. So I've just highlighted the potential first line passing options, or the space that the mutual help space occupies. And this is about it, and it's in relation to the ball. Now, the roles of these players can vary, and the spaces even can vary between the thirds of the field, because going through the thirds of the fields, all the space changes, and just the dynamics and rules and principles of the game change, whether it be offsides, which is probably the biggest one, or the goal of the team when they're in each third of the field. So getting back to it, the mutual help space, the first rule or goal of these players is to get themselves between opposing players. So what I mean by this is literally play between defenders. So this is one rule. And this may vary depending, as we'll see moving forward, but just highlighting here in orange that the two players this really impacts is the 6 and the 8. And these players are positioning themselves between defenders, occupying two defenders. And then another rule for these players is try to manipulate the defensive players into conceding more dangerous spaces. So a good example of this is the fullback, and he can come wider, forcing maybe the winger to press a greater distance, or he can come narrow, forcing the winger more narrow and vacating space out wide for the winger, or being narrow just to have another tighter passing option to give the defense a harder time when moving. So we have between players, we have manipulate the defensive players to create space for others, and then we have another one of create the third line passing options. So let me delete these quickly. So open up progressive spaces, we can call it, or create more dangerous passing options. So if they are marked up pretty well, let's say the defense is marked up and there's no progression, maybe we can have some rotation here just to manipulate the defense a little bit. Might not even be this exaggerated, but I'll do it for the example. And then we have a little opening. Let me get the tool to highlight it right here for now the winger to invert, or the 9 to drop, and maybe the winger makes a run in here to pin back the defense. So that's what I mean by play between players, which facilitates harder defensive actions for the opposing team, and it creates more open passing angles when you are between defenders. And then it also allows you to receive in more space and give you more time on the ball. Then manipulate the defenders to open up spaces further up the field, or free up advanced area passing options to then lead your team to progress. So let me put these players back into their spaces. Here we are. I had the fullbacks narrow for this one and the wingers wider, as my last videos showed the opposite. And now let me put the mutual help space back in. And this is really to try and progress, but also maintain a strong structure for circulation so the ball isn't lost. So here we are. And this is a tight area, and this area, when the ball is lost, then directly correlates to counterpressing or active players in transition. So here we are, and in the next video we'll talk about how the space changes from player to player, and how it changes with the ball. But for now, we're going to leave it like this. And then the next shape, I'll highlight it in black so you can see it well, is the space of cooperation. And this is pretty much the external structure of the players of the team in possession. So what this does is it pretty much says the offensive team's zone of influence when they're in possession. And these players, they deal a great deal with pinning and pinning, so holding the defensive players to their positions, and being able to take advantage of imbalances within the defensive shape. So what I mean by that is if the defense overshifts, say they shift too much, and now the center back, say he was a good ball playing center back, he could then switch the ball to take advantage of this imbalance in space that the defense has left open, as I'm highlighting. So this is an exaggerated example, but one concept that really takes advantage of this, and you see it quite clearly, is overload and isolate, which a lot of teams use. I know when Man City a couple years back, they did it probably better than anyone at the time, and that's when they reached 100 points and took the league. So, but anyway, so they can also pin players. So as we see, a lot of times a big talking point is pinning the back four, and the team in blue is doing that with 3 players. So this is pinning the back four, and this prevents them from jumping into the midfield, any of them, without conceding more dangerous space. So if the fullback was to jump, to press, or here, let's give you a better example. Say the ball was played to the 8. If this player is pinned, he cannot jump without conceding more dangerous space in behind. So he is being effectively pinned. And now the last space that isn't talked about very much is, I'll highlight it in yellow, is the intermediary space, and this is the space between the space of cooperation and the mutual help space. So there is typically only 1 or 2 players occupying this space, maybe 2. If we wanted to shrink the mutual help space, we can, as maybe that's not a first line passing option that I drew. So I will change it. So let's say this is the mutual help space, and then we have 2 intermediary players that I have squared or boxed off in the half spaces. And these are the players that get on the end of third line passing options, are involved in third man movements, and they also are involved in manipulating the space of the defense. So if they come wider, maybe they stretch the midfield staggering, or they come narrow, but their main responsibility is connecting the offensive structure while reflecting the team's goals in possession. So if the team, for example, uses a lot of third man concepts, then they should prepare themselves to do so. So the third line concept would be here, third man concept to here. So that would just be one example. Or if they're more focused on using their individual qualitative superiority against maybe a man-oriented defense, they could use more blindside runs. So they could do this by starting wider in the half space or starting the center and using a double movement to come here, manipulate the defender a little bit to then open up a passing angle inside, and then another, or create the third man concept. But either way, they're usually the players who are actively progressing the team's play further forward on the ground, and they are the ones who are penetrating the defensive block. So those are the three spaces that we've talked about. I just want to make a quick introductory video. So in the next videos, we can go more in depth on the rules and how to use this to create a team that is able to use these positional spaces to then progress with the ball under control. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. See you for the next one.